Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Senior News Editor with Retail Insider. Joining me today is Deb Craven, who is Chief Operating Officer at Longo's. Thanks for joining us today, Deb.
Thanks so much, Mario. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you about the role that women play in leadership roles and just how successful that is to the overall company's success. So thanks for having me.
You bet. And let's start just by a little bit of your background. Now I've looked at your bio, and you've got places like Nike, SportChek, Purolator, Marks, now Longos that you've been involved in over your career. Some of these are very quote unquote male dominated industries. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you navigated through those male dominated industries over the years to be at the position you are today?
Sure. I'll give a little bit of history first and on the background, as you mentioned. So the underpinning of all of my background, I think, is my CA designation or CPA designation now that it's referred to. So that's the undergrad program that I did at university, went on to write all the exams, got my designation. And that's really been the underpinning of how I've then tackled everything going forward. That amazing training that you get from having to go into a company, figure it out very quickly, figure out how to audit it, figure out how to work with people regardless of the department they're in. You're not just talking to the other accountants, you're talking to all the different members of the company. You got to get in there fast, be efficient, have them not not try to avoid you, try to get answers, and so get along with people, but yet have an unbiased view on things and assess things quickly. So I'm just really thankful that I have that kind of really solid foundation. And I'd say getting your CPA designation is also, it's very much a meritocracy, right? You're writing a kind of a long set of exams that are, call them blind exams, right? The person marking doesn't know who you are, and you're passing or failing based on your merits. And I got, I think that was really, really helpful for the kind of profession as a whole. And I really loved that approach to it as well. And so then from there, that's when I went to, after I finished up at the CA firm I was at, I went to Purolator. And I'd say Purolator, huge logistics and transportation business, as you know, one of the largest in Canada. What an amazing place to go. Very, I'd say, male dominated. A lot of the individuals at Purolator that I worked with had been working there for 30 years, 40 years. They had started out as couriers or working in any of the other locations across Canada. And so it was, some of the best advice I got was from the person who ultimately ended up leading operations there. His name is Mike. And Mike said to me a couple of times, he said, you know what, you're not going to earn a place at the table where big decisions are made. You're not going to earn that just because of the letters that happen to be behind your name. You're going to earn that because you bring value to the conversation. You're asking questions, you're moving things forward, you're making us think of things we didn't think about before. And I have carried that with me from day one, that Mike shared that with me. And once I embraced that, I realized, it's about that. It's not about kind of your designation or who you are personally. It's about adding value and trying to figure out things and how to help the company as a whole. And and then after that, moving over to Nike, like getting into some more retail. And I found it was a really complementary skill set. Having that huge base of knowledge in transportation and logistics, a large part of retail is about transportation and logistics, making sure you've got goods at the right place at the right time. And so Nike was a fantastic opportunity for me to figure out how to connect those dots and add value as their CFO in Canada. And the same thing at Marks and SportChek. It was a really great opportunity to bring all those things together. So consider myself really lucky. And then the move to Longos was then a chance to explore retail in a different format, going to grocery as opposed to the sporting goods and the other areas that Marks dabbles in.
Now, when you look at the opportunities out there for women, in terms of executive or management or leadership roles, would you say it's better today than when you first started off in your career?
Definitely. And I would say that what I also notice is that in meetings that I'm at now, in which unfortunately we still all spend way too much time in meetings, there are there's a lot more diversity around the table of meetings that I'm in now compared to meetings that I was in at the beginning of my career. It was very normal at the beginning of my career to be one of the only women at the table, or one of a very few number of women at the table, let alone other forms of diversity around the table. So does that make it easier for women? I think that we have a lot more women entering into different fields of study, and really being open to exploring different things that they want to do with their career. And I think there's a lot more role models and a lot more people that they can talk to about, well, what is it like? I didn't feel like I had that as much when I first started. There weren't any female VPs I believe when I first started at Purolator, or senior to that. And so there wasn't a lot of role models that I could kind of watch from afar, talk to directly to get advice. And I hope that's one thing that's really changed for people coming into the workforce now, that they're seeing a lot more role models, whatever skill set or attributes that they're looking for in mentors.
Yeah. Now, one of the lack of a better word, issues that women have faced, or challenges over the years, has simply been the fact that, they're in many ways the primary caregiver in families, whether that's with children, or even beyond that, taking care of parents and stuff like that. How has that balance, worked out over the years, as in terms of the business world? Are we more receptive to accommodating that kind of the situation, or the reality, I guess, that many women are in?
Right. I think we are. And I think there's two pieces to that answer from what's coming to mind immediately. The first one is, I think even before the pandemic, I think we were getting much better at recognizing that regardless if you were male or female, if you were a parent or you had a life outside of work that required you to, give attention to and not have 24/7 devoted to be able to be devoted to work. And so I think there was a huge appreciation that we all bring that with us. And that's a huge part of all of our lives. I certainly found that my children are out of the house now and off on their own, but when they were in those younger years, and it was a lot of heavy lifting, having obviously a really understanding and strong and equal partner at home makes a big difference. If you do have that, that was a huge help for me personally. But also just being transparent about what's going on with the people that you're working with. If you couldn't be there at a meeting, or you had to miss something because one of your kids was sick, then being as transparent as possible, and people did tend to understand. But I'd say, at the beginning of my career, probably not as much. It certainly was getting much better and much more understanding, I think, for men and women as we were approaching the pandemic. Yeah. And then, wow, the pandemic hit, and that was just I think just a level setting across the board. All of a sudden, we were all spending all of our time really getting to know a lot more personal details about the people that we've worked with for so long, because we were in their homes on video. So you saw kids running through the background, you heard dogs barking, you were part of a very much more intimate part of their life, and it was okay, and it was great to learn the same challenges that I'm sure a number of my team members, my dogs would go nuts if a squirrel, ran across the backyard, or if someone came to the door in the middle of a call. And I'm sure my team members were like, okay, great, she's human. That happens to her too. It's not a big deal. And so when their kids were, chatting away or waving to us on a call, it was all good. And I hope that's a part of the outtake of the pandemic that we all keep, right? That we recognize that we all have these lives, these full, broad spectrum lives that we bring with us, and it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you look at women leaders, what do they bring to the table that's different than men, say, in a boardroom or running a company?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always hate to generalize. So these
Yeah,
are my observations, and I'm not saying that this is applicable across the board. But I
good.
find that the women that I have worked with, and I think myself as well, we're probably a little bit more comfortable with being vulnerable, right? With being a little bit more transparent about things. If there's an unsaid elephant in the room, I do find, again, in my experiences that I've had, and I certainly can talk for myself, I'm a lot more comfortable with just saying, wow, it feels like there's a big unsaid thing here that we just need to get on the table and talk about. Or, you know what, everyone, I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but I don't understand what Tom just said about this. So Tom, could you go a little bit more deeply into that? Because I don't think I fully
Yeah.
understood the implications of it. Whereas I think we tend to be probably, you know, a little bit more open to doing that, and then it always opens up the conversation, because you can bet if I'm saying it out loud, everyone else around the table, or 90% of the people, are going, thank goodness, because I didn't understand what Tom was saying either, or what the implications were. I think the other thing that women that I've worked with in the past have brought to the table, probably with a little bit more comfort, is that ability for people to make people feel comfortable opening up with them about what's making them vulnerable. So understanding what's going on, understanding why they might be a little bit frustrated that day, understanding why they're not happy with how their career is going, or how they're not like working on a certain project, or someone's driving them a little, you know, is frustrating them at work. And I find, if you know, it's fairly straightforward for me to get people to open up about that, and then you can get at it, right? And then you can say, okay, great, if that's the challenge, here's what I think we can do, here's what I've done in the past, is this helpful, think about this as a strategy.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're not going to crack those things, right? You're not going to break through unless you understand the underlying challenge that someone has, and you can't do that if they won't open up to you.
Hmm. Interesting. Now, when you look at the landscape that's out there now in the business world, and if you had women that came up to you and asked for advice, how do I make it in a male-dominated world, or how do I make it in, well, let's face it, even in business itself, right? In general, right? What's your best advice for them?
I think that my best advice, the first thing is, do a lot of thinking about who you are, what your strengths are. I can tell you, at the beginning, when I first started working at Purolator, and I was working my way through the organization, and when I was first promoted to VP at Purolator. So the first, I think one of the first females, maybe, but the only one at the time. And I had a number of women who, within the organization, coming to me and saying, okay, you've done it. So what exactly did you do? Okay, so you got your CA designation, and then you went and did this job, and then you went and did this job. And it was almost like there was a formula there. And I don't know how many times I said, there's no formula. This is about what works for me is not going to be what works for anybody else. So there's
Yeah.
no kind of check off the boxes. You know, spend some time in internal audit, spend some time in operations, spend some time here. You don't check off the boxes. It's about knowing who you are, what you love to do, what your own superpowers are, and then jumping into things that really play to those superpowers, I think, and also being open enough to listen when you're getting feedback about maybe blind spots that you have,
Yeah.
and not taking that personally, but saying, wow, thank you. Like when that person I referenced, Mike, said, you know, Deb, don't get mad that you're not getting invited to meetings. You show me that you've got something to add, I'll invite you. And that was not easy to hear, but then once you reflect on it, and you accept it, and you're like, you know what, maybe I am just being expecting to be invited. Okay, how can I help them out in this next meeting? And so be really, really open to getting that feedback when you get it, and making the adjustments that you need to make.
So, Deb, how when you look at again, women and working in business and in the business world, how important is it to have mentors that are women, or role models that are women?
I think it's probably becoming more frequent, which I think is a good thing. So I would say most of my mentors in throughout my career have been male, and they've been phenomenal. They have helped me in so many different ways, but I didn't always have a lot of female mentors or role models. I would say kind of in the last 10 years or so, that's certainly changed. And I think it's just critical. And there's mentors and there's partners, I think, too. Women who are maybe at the same level as you in the organization, and really forming those partnerships to be able to say, hey, how do you handle this when this happens? How do you, like, having that safe place that you can go and have that conversation, share some of your struggles, ask for advice. And that has been invaluable to me. I can think of so many women that I would consider partners in that we having those really, really good conversations, being transparent, being vulnerable again, and helping each other. So I think it's just incredibly, incredibly important. And then the mentoring pieces and coaching piece is interesting to me, because if people ask me if I'll be their mentor, my first answer is I absolutely would love to spend more time. But talk to me about what a mentor means to you. What are you looking for from a mentoring relationship? Is it someone to bounce off some of the struggles that you're having? Is it someone that you're hoping will help you move to a certain spot within the organization or a different organization? So I think they're important, but equally important is setting those expectations of what you're looking for from that relationship.
So throughout your career, and specifically in the kind of the industries that you have been in and worked in, were there any specific or people that you could point to as role models that were women that you looked up to and I don't know, aspired to be or learn from?
Yes, certainly when I was at Deloitte two times, once when I was getting my CA designation, and then a second time when I moved into the consulting group. And I was brought in because there was a new female partner being brought on. She was there to start up the regulatory consulting group. Her name is Brenda Epperl, fantastic, former head of the Ontario Securities Commission. And she was brought in to start up this group. And they were reaching out to people who had worked at Deloitte before to say, hey, it'd be great for Brenda to have somebody who knows their way around here, knows how to get things done. And I thought, wow, like, because you're really selling services, and for an accountant to be involved in learning how to sell things, I thought that would be so interesting to do. And Brenda was one of those role models for me. I watched her constantly to say, wow, here's someone coming into still at that time a fairly male dominated partnership level, starting up a new practice area from scratch, and just watching how she tackled that with professionalism, with grace, with transparency, bringing her whole self to work, and the team that she created. That was that hugely impactful to me.
All right, wonderful. Well, thanks very much, Deb, for joining us today.
No problem. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right, that was Deb Craven, who is Chief Operating Officer of Longo's. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Senior News Editor with Retail Insider. Thanks for joining us today.